Hi guys, today it is another homework helper, but before we get started with our lesson for today, we're actually going to wake our brains up. So you'll notice there are 4 brain wakers today. And so what I want you to do is pause the video and I want you to go through each of these, and then of course I will come back and I will share the answers with you. Okay, number 1, 6 times 7, you should have had 42. Find the perimeter of this figure is number 2. And if you remember when we talked about perimeter, it's all the way around the edge. And this is a rectangle. So what I know to be true about a rectangle is if there are 2 centimeters on one side, there's going to be 2 centimeters on the other side. And if there's 7 here, that means there's going to be 7 there. And finding the perimeter is adding up all of those edges. So if I have 7 and 2, which is 9, and 7 and 2, which is 9, that gives me 18. So my perimeter equals 18. I hope you got that. The next one was finding area, and area is on the inside. So if you did this, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, you had 4 across, and you had 4 down. So you should have found that the area was 16 because you multiplied the 2 of those. And the last one, write the mixed number and the improper fraction for this picture. All right, first of all, I'm going to notice that this has been divided into 8 parts. When I count the top, when I count all the colored parts, I'm going to find out that I have 13. So 13/8 is my improper fraction. Now, this is going to also equal another way that we could write this. So I have 1 whole and I had 5/8. So 13/8 actually equals the same thing as 1 whole and 5/8. I hope you got that. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about measurement, kind of the first part of measurement, and that includes temperature. So we are focusing on Fahrenheit and Celsius today. All right, some things that we need to, what are some things that we need the temperature of? This is a great time for you to brainstorm a list of things that you think that you might need to measure with temperature and you might need to use temperature for. The 2 websites we actually did in our Zoom meeting, so it would be great for you to pause it, copy these down and go through with them. The password for BrainPop is at the bottom and the username. So this would be great for you to reference. This is something that we kicked off our lesson with and it really helped us understand it well. All right, so in the lesson we actually learned that Fahrenheit are customary units of temperature. So, and customary means that's what we use most of the time. And Celsius are actually metric units of temperature. And we're going to see how they're similar and how they're different. So the first thing that I want you to notice is that when we're talking about temperature, this is a thermometer. There's lots of different types of thermometers, but this is the type of thermometer you might be most familiar with. And we have sometimes the thermometer is actually divided between the Fahrenheit and the Celsius. It has both of them on there. So Fahrenheit might be on the one side, Celsius might be on the other side. And remember, we use Fahrenheit. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when water freezes. And water is going to freeze over in the Celsius area. It's going to freeze at 0. That makes a whole lot of sense to me because 0 means nothing, so it would be very, very cold. Where 0 for us would be extreme, like nobody gets 0 for us. But 32 degrees, I always check the weather, and if we've had some rain or we've had some snow and the temperature remains 32 degrees or below, chances are we're not going to school that day or we're going very late. All right, the water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So if your mom's boiling up some water, you can tell her you know how much that boils to, 212. That's when it starts to boil. But in Celsius, it's going to boil at 100 degrees. All right, so keep that in mind as we are thinking through temperature. All right, this is a Watchman. So when we are figuring out temperature, there's a couple things that we need to pay close attention to. First thing that I notice is that this is asking for degrees Celsius. So my answer is going to be in degrees Celsius. All right. The second thing that we need to look for is that these are counted a lot of different ways. Sometimes they go by 1, sometimes they go by 2, sometimes they go by 10. In our case, we have to determine how many of these little notches are going for. So if I see that I have got 25 here and I have 30 there, if I'm counting, I know that there's not um, that there is actually 5 notches in between. So I see 25 and I see 26, 27, 28, 29. So this actually tells me that this is counting by ones and it's going to be 29 degrees Celsius. All right. On this one, I would like for you to try. Go ahead and count up what you think this temperature is. I do want you to notice that this is Fahrenheit, and it is important to show the difference because we know that the temperatures are not the same. All right, if you would go ahead and pause it and try this one. All right, did you get 58 degrees Fahrenheit? Remember, we have to add that 58 degrees Fahrenheit. If you did, great job. I'd try this one. Okay, did you get 69 degrees Fahrenheit? This was a little tricky because it wasn't counting by ones. It was actually counting by twos. But if you notice, it's in between 68 and 70. That line is in between, so that's why it would be 69 degrees. All right, try this one. Okay, did you get 76 degrees Fahrenheit? If so, then you can read a thermometer well. Try this one. Okay, I hope this one didn't trick you. If you noticed, we were counting by twos this time. So we would have 50, 52, 54, 58, 60. Now, notice that that red line is in between 60 and 62. So the number in between 60 and 62 would be 61 degrees Fahrenheit. That was a little bit tricky. All right, this is another watch me. And what I want you to do is I want you to see how these sort of line up. So if you remember, we were saying that one side is Fahrenheit and one side is Celsius. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this. Notice that at the top, I'm going to try real hard with my finger. Oops, it's a little bit lower. All right, you want to get to the very top of the red part. All right, that's the mercury. And as the weather gets hotter, we learned this in our brain pop. As the weather gets warmer, that mercury line goes up, and as the weather gets cooler, it comes down and gets lower. So in this case, if I'm looking, that's right about there. And this is actually really odd because this is counting by fives. So I have 100, 105, 110, 115, 120. So I actually have 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now over on the Celsius side, I am noticing that I've got 30 and 40. So this big line in between there, that is actually going to be 35 degrees Celsius. So notice, if it were 110 degrees here in Lynchburg, Virginia, it would be 35 degrees Celsius also. It would be equivalent. That is the equivalent amount. But again, when the weatherman's on and they tell the temperature, they're telling that temperature in degrees of Fahrenheit because that's our customary. Okay, here's another watch me because you're going to have to do a couple things with the next slides. First thing that I want you to do is I want you to name the temperatures. So I notice that I have 80 right here. I have 80 degrees, and these are going to be in Fahrenheit. So I have 80 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Then over here I'm counting, and I notice that from here to here is 5, and from here to here is 5 more. So I know I'm counting by ones this time. All right, so I have 70, 65, 66, 67, 68. So I've got 68 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so my question says, did the temperature rise or fall and by how many degrees? So I started with 80 and I went down to 68. So it means that my temperature is getting cooler. All right, to find out how many degrees it changed, I'm just going to subtract those two. So I make this a 7, this becomes a 10, this becomes a 2, and this becomes a 12. So I have 12 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the difference. All right, time for you to try. Remember, I want you to write down your temperatures, tell me did it rise or fall, and then tell me by how many degrees, and then pause the video and come on back. Okay, first thing that I would notice is that I have 36 degrees for the first one, and I have 27 degrees. There was a drop in temperature. It means it was warmer and it got cooler. And to find out how many degrees it dropped, I am going to subtract. So I went ahead and subtracted, and you should have had 9 degrees Fahrenheit should have been your answer. All right, try this one. Okay, now I can tell that I have 42 degrees here and that I am going to have 58 degrees here. But when I put that down and I want to do some subtracting to see how they did, I have to put the 58 first. So in this case, I am finding that the temperature rose, but I want to find out how many degrees it rose. So I'm still going to use the strategy of subtraction, which means that I am going to have 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So it rose 16 degrees. It got warmer by 16 degrees. All right, try this one. Okay, I got 27 degrees. And then for my next one, I got 16 degrees. And in order to find, I found that they fell. So in order to find out how much they fell by, I'm going to subtract, and I had 11 degrees. I hope you got that too. All right, try this one. Okay, I found that I had 69 degrees, and then I had 50 degrees, and I can tell that it fell, so it was warmer, got colder, and I can tell we did this by 19 degrees. Try this one. Okay, I can see that I had 15 degrees, and then I had 3 degrees, so there was quite a bit of a drop there, and to find out how much that drop is, I would subtract, so it dropped by 12 degrees. Try this one. Okay, I found out that I had 27 degrees and I had 16 degrees, and this was a fall. It got cooler, and it got cooler by 11 degrees. All right, now we've got a temperature word problem. So this is a watch me. So if you'll watch me on this one. The temperature inside the truck was 93 degrees Fahrenheit. After sitting in the sun for an hour, the temperature rose to 112. How much did the truck warm up? Now I see that I want to know the difference between them. I notice that 93 is listed first, but I know I need to subtract. I can't put the 93 first, so I'm going to put 112, and I'm going to subtract the 93 degrees, because what happened is the temperature got hotter, but I want to know by how many. So if I subtract here, this is becoming 9, and this becomes 0. This becomes a 1. So actually what happened is it was in, the temperature inside was 93 degrees. It rose 19 degrees and became 112. Okay, I want you to try this one. So pause the video and come on back in a moment. Okay, this said the average temperature for January was 78 degrees. The average temperature for February is 19 degrees colder. What was the average temperature for February? So what I noticed here is that it got colder. It was 19 degrees lower than the temperature actually was in January. So in order to find out what that temperature was, I have to subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and cross this out. Becomes 18. This is a 9. All right, so what this tells me is that the average temperature for February is 59 degrees. I hope you got that. All right, this is a little bit unusual, but this is called brain dump time. So I'm going to just read through some things, and I want to know what you remember about temperature. What do we use temperature for? I want you to think, maybe write some things down. What are the two different ways we can tell the temperature? What is important about reading temperature? How do we read temperature? Can you think of 5 things you could measure in temperature? And what's the freezing temperature? What's the boiling temperature? And for fun, what's the temperature outside right now? It could vary depending on when you watch this. But I want you to think through, can you answer all of those questions? If you can, then you have a great understanding of temperature. If you don't, you need to go back through the video and check some other things out. All right, guys, you made it through temperature, and I'm really proud of you. And I hope that you'll become more aware of temperature, uh, the temperature that we use every day, because it is something we use on a regular basis. Until next time, bye-bye.